Welcome, fellow travelers through the corridors of time and possibility. This is Alternatify, where we peel back the layers of reality and ask the most tantalizing question: what if? Today, we're stepping into a world that almost was, a timeline where one of the most iconic bands of a generation defied the odds and stayed together. We're talking about Oasis, a band that didn't just make music. They were a cultural force, a swaggering soundtrack to the 90s and beyond. They defined an era, captured the spirit of a nation, and then in a flash of brotherly fury it was over. But what if that final explosive argument never happened? What if the relentless infighting didn't lead to the ultimate split? We're going to explore the potential albums, the hypothetical tours, the continued cultural footprint of a united Oasis. Prepare yourself for a wild ride into an alternative reality, a glimpse of the Britpop dynasty that could have been. The year was 2009. The place, Paris. A backstage row, reportedly involving a guitar and some choice words, became the final straw. Noel Gallagher walked away. Oasis, the band that seemed indestructible, was no more. It was a seismic event for music fans, a moment that felt like the end of an era. The airwaves felt quieter, the headlines less dramatic. For many, it was unthinkable. How could the band that gave us Definitely Maybe and Morning Glory just cease to exist? This is where our journey begins. We rewind to that fateful night. What if anything had happened differently? What if the argument cooled down? What if a mediator stepped in? What if Noel, despite everything, decided the band was bigger than the conflict? This single point of divergence changes everything. It unlocks a future that, in our reality, remains only a dream for millions of fans. The split wasn't just a band breaking up. It felt like a piece of cultural history being abruptly torn away. To understand the alternative, we must first understand the reality. Why did Oasis split in the first place? It wasn't just one fight. The band's demise was the culmination of years, decades even, of simmering tension and clashing personalities. At the heart of it were the brothers Gallagher, Liam and Noel, two forces of nature, bound by blood but seemingly destined to collide. Liam, the frontman, the voice, the swaggering, unpredictable rebel who embodied rock and roll excess. He was the ID of the band. He was charismatic, captivating, but also volatile. His energy fueled the live shows, but his antics often fueled the drama. Noel, the songwriter, the architect, the quiet genius crafting anthems in the background. He was the superego, the control. He was the musical backbone, the source of their greatest hits, but also a perfectionist who struggled with the chaos Liam brought. Their creative differences were also significant. Liam favored raw, primal rock and roll. Noel wanted to experiment, to evolve the sound. This internal friction was constant, a creative tension that sometimes produced brilliance, but often produced conflict. Add to this the external pressures: immense fame, vast wealth, constant touring, and relentless media scrutiny amplifying every spat. They lived under a microscope, their every word and action dissected. This environment would test any relationship, let alone a famously volatile sibling one. The band was a pressure cooker, and the lid was bound to blow off eventually. The wonder isn't that they split, but perhaps that they lasted as long as they did. But in our alternative timeline, that pressure cooker somehow holds. The lid stays on. So let's step into this new reality. The Paris incident is averted. Maybe a phone call from a loved one, a moment of clarity, or just sheer exhaustion prevents Noel from walking away. He stays. The band continues. This single decision ripples outwards, fundamentally altering the musical landscape. The primary impact is immediate and profound. A new era of Oasis albums begins. After Dig Out Your Soul in 2008, what comes next? We can only speculate, but imagine the possibilities. Perhaps the next album, say in 2011 or 2012, blends the raw energy of their early work with the more experimental sounds Noel was exploring. Maybe Liam's songwriting contributions increase, pushing the band in slightly different, raw directions, while Noel provides the polished anthems. Picture albums titled something like As We Were, or Standing on the Edge of the World, filled with stadium-sized choruses and gritty, heartfelt lyrics. These albums wouldn't just be released, they'd dominate. Oasis had a built-in audience hungry for new material. They would continue to top charts globally, their releases becoming major cultural events, not just for fans but for the entire music industry. Their continued presence would inspire a new generation of bands, not just in the UK but worldwide. They'd be the benchmark, the band to emulate or rebel against. Think of the tours. Instead of solo ventures, we'd see Oasis headlining the biggest festivals on Earth year after year. Glastonbury, Coachella, Reading and Leeds. Stadiums across Europe, North America, South America, Asia, all filled with hundreds of thousands singing along to new anthems alongside the classics. The scale would be immense, a global touring machine, solidifying their status as one of the biggest live acts in history. Their music would continue to evolve, perhaps incorporating new influences, collaborating with different producers, pushing their sound in unexpected ways. Would they have a late career masterpiece? A concept album? A stripped-back acoustic record? The possibilities are endless and fascinating to ponder. This united front wouldn't just be about the music, it would be about the narrative, the brothers against all odds making it work. That story itself is compelling. It would add another layer to their legend, proving that even the most volatile relationships can endure for the sake of something bigger. The music industry would look different. Would certain solo artists have emerged? Would other bands have filled the void left by their split? A continued Oasis presence means less space, less oxygen for others at the very top. They would remain the gravitational center of British rock. Their hypothetical discography post-2008 is a blank canvas, waiting to be filled with imagined classics that, in our world, never got written. Each potential album title, each imagined tracklist, represents a path not taken, a sound unheard. This alternative timeline isn't just about more music, it's about a different trajectory for rock and roll itself. Oasis was more than just a band, they were a cultural phenomenon. They embodied the spirit of 90s Britain, the swagger, the optimism, the working class pride. They were the sound of a nation feeling good about itself, a symbol of cool Britannia. A continued Oasis would solidify their place not just as a great band, but as an enduring national treasure. They would remain a constant, powerful symbol of British identity, their music woven into the fabric of everyday life. Imagine their songs continuing to soundtrack major sporting events, appearing in films and television shows, being sung in pubs across the country. Their influence on fashion and style would persist. The parkas, the tracksuits, the casual cool, it would remain relevant, constantly refreshed by their public image. They wouldn't just be a nostalgic memory, they'd be a living, breathing part of the cultural landscape. Their interviews, their public appearances, their inevitable controversies would continue to dominate headlines, sparking national conversations. They were the last of the truly massive, culturally dominant rock bands in the UK. Their continued existence would have prolonged that era. Would they have become elder statesmen, like the Rolling Stones or U2? Still touring, still relevant, still capable of commanding massive audiences. Their story, the working-class lads who conquered the world, would continue to inspire. It's a narrative deeply ingrained in the British psyche. They represented a certain defiance, a refusal to conform, a belief in the power of rock and roll. That spirit would have remained alive and prominent. Their music would continue to be the soundtrack to generations of young people discovering rock music, providing a link between the past and the present. The cultural impact is hard to overstate. Oasis wasn't just background noise, they were part of the conversation, part of the identity. In this alternative timeline, that conversation never stopped. The soundtrack kept playing. Of course, this isn't a purely utopian vision. a continued union wouldn't be without its challenges. The creative differences and personal conflicts that plagued them wouldn't magically disappear. The pressure of maintaining their status, of constantly delivering hit albums and sell-out tours, would be immense. Would the music suffer? Would the constant tension eventually lead to a less inspired output? Could the personal toll of being in such a high-pressure environment, especially for two volatile personalities, become too much? Perhaps the split, painful as it was inevitable, a necessary release valve for unsustainable pressure. Maybe the magic would have faded, the spark extinguished by the relentless grind and internal strife. It's possible that the alternative timeline sees a band that, while commercially successful, loses its creative edge or implodes even more spectacularly later on. The legend of Oasis in our world is partly defined by its abrupt, dramatic ending. A longer, perhaps messier run might have altered that legacy. So, how would our present day feel different if Oasis had never split? The music industry landscape would be altered. Would the dominance of certain genres have been delayed or lessened by Oasis's continued presence? Would the narrative of British music over the last decade and a half be different, less focused on solo artists or different band dynamics? Culturally, would there be a greater sense of continuity with the Britpop era? Would that swaggering confidence still feel more present? For individual fans, the difference is tangible. No more waiting for solo albums, no more dashed hopes of a reunion. Just new Oasis music, new tours. Think of the conversations we wouldn't have had, the endless speculation about a reunion, the comparing of solo careers, the what-if discussions we're having right now. Our collective musical memory would include albums and tours that simply don't exist in this reality. The absence of Oasis has created a void that arguably no other band has truly filled in the same way. In the alternative timeline, that void never opened up. The music kept coming. The story of Oasis is, in our reality, a cautionary tale about the destructive power of conflict, even within immense talent. But it's also a testament to the power of music to capture a moment, to define a generation, and to create an enduring legacy. Even with their relatively short run at the absolute peak, their impact is undeniable. In the alternative timeline, that legacy is amplified, extended, perhaps even complicated by a longer, rockier journey. It's a legacy of anthems, of attitude, of believing in the power of three chords and the truth. It's the legacy of a band that could have been even bigger, even more influential, had they managed to overcome their internal demons. So we return from our journey into the alternative. The reality is that Oasis did split. The music stopped. But the question of what if remains, a fascinating thought experiment for anyone who loves music, history, or just a good story. What do you think? How would the world be different? What would those albums sound like? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this trip down an alternative path, please give this video a like. Subscribe to Alternatify for more journeys into different realities. Hit the notification bell so you don't miss our next exploration. And feel free to suggest other what-if scenarios you'd like us to explore. Until next time, keep questioning everything and keep imagining the possibilities.